Assalamu alaikum. You are listening to the Professional Muslim Women podcast, a place for working Muslim women to share their stories, struggles, triumphs, and lessons learned along the way in pursuit of their careers. Being a Muslim woman who wants to advance her career without compromising her faith or values can be challenging. We know these systems were never designed for us, but that doesn't mean we can't be strategic in thriving in them as we advance our careers. In this season of the podcast, we'll continue to bring you inspirational, trailblazing, successful, and fulfilled professional Muslim women to you. We'll be introducing a mentoring segment where we answer your burning career and life goals questions. We'll also be featuring the Taking Up Space course, the foundational career strategy course of our sponsor, the Defiance Academy. Tune in to the Professional Muslim Women podcast with me, your host, Dr. Qali Hussain, trauma surgeon, wife, mom of 6, CEO, and keynote speaker for deep dives on all things career and life goals. Keep an ear out for the occasional surprise visits from our sister and friend of the show, Dr. Hani Ahmed, hospitalist, mom, and physician leader. On this podcast, we keep it brutally honest and tackle the taboo so you can be better prepared. Get ready to be inspired and learn how you can be strategic in forging your own path as well. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the podcast. I hope your week is going well. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about expectations versus reality. And I'm going to talk about it from my experience of being a Black Muslim woman surgeon. So about a year into starting my attendingship, which means I finished 4 years of medical school, I've done 5 years of surgery training, and I did a year of fellowship. And so it's my first year as an attending, and I am operating on my own. And so at least the first 3 to 5 years of being an attending is one of the most difficult, in my opinion, because you're now independent. You are solely responsible for all your decisions and for all your outcomes. And so I had this expectation of, okay, you know what? I've proven myself. I've done all the work. I've passed all the boards. I've proven myself. And therefore, the group that I joined, it was a pretty nice group. It was very great colleagues. And I was like, okay, this is it. I have nothing else to prove. I'm good. Now I just have to become efficient and operate as much as possible so I can gain the most experience and be very, very comfortable. And so I had this one case where I had a patient crashing, and as trauma surgeons, there's a really difficult procedure that we do, but it's bread and butter trauma, right? So when a patient is coding, in other words, when their heart stops, in trauma, it's usually due to huge blood loss. They lost so much blood that their heart stopped. So what we do is we literally cut their chest open, put a big clamp on their aorta, so the big tube that takes blood from the heart all the way to the rest of the body. We put a clamp on that, and then we do compressions. You know how you do CPR? You push on people's chests to pump their heart? We literally do that on the heart directly with our hands. So I did that procedure on this lady. I got her back, and we were taking care of her in the ICU, stopped her bleeding, and she needed more surgery, but we got her back. And so I'm explaining the case and what happened on sign out, where I'm post call, I'm leaving the hospital and somebody else is coming on, and I'm telling them about the patients and what happened and what needs to be done. And as I'm talking about the case and what I did, I had this one person who eyes just wide open, just looked at me and was like, "You did the surgery? You did the thoracotomy?" That's what it's called. It's called a thoracotomy. And he said, "You did the thoracotomy?" And I'm looking around like, who else is supposed to do it, right? I'm the trauma surgeon who's trained for years to do this. And it's an emergency procedure. So when you need to do it, you need to do it right away. So I just looked at him and said, "Why? Why do you ask?" And he just collected himself and was like, oh, it's just you made a really fast decision. Kudos to you. And I always think of this case when we talk about expectations versus reality, right? The expectation in this case is that once you've proven yourself, once you've gone through all the hardships, that things change. And all of a sudden, you're not a trainee, you're not someone who's trying to prove something. There's not that many people that look like you in this field. There's not that many people who've done it the way you're doing it. There's not many hijabis. There's not many Black women. There's not many people who have kids, and all the different reasons people use. And you expect that when you make it and when you've proven yourself and you do the work, that things change, right? That's the expectation. But the reality is that nothing changes. The reality is that the system maintains itself. And so, because I've gone through similar things like this, I got to a point where this kind of stuff no longer bothered me. But that case, I always go back to it when people talk about, well, I did this and I did this and I did that, and things still haven't changed. I did all this work and things haven't changed because we need to understand reality. We need to manage our expectations because when we set high expectations for these systems, for these work environments, when we set high expectations and say, you know what, I'm going to prove myself and things will be different, I will be treated differently, I'll be treated with the respect that I deserve. We are all human beings. We all deserve to be treated with respect. We're not asking for anything extra. But when we set that high expectation of how the system will change itself, that's when we set ourselves up for disappointment. We set ourselves up for disappointment when we set high expectations. So while I'm not a big advocate of being negative and lowering your expectations, I think it's important that we at least manage our expectations and make decisions or make plans based on reality, because the reality is that it takes a lot for these places to change. It takes a lot for people to change. And so, why do I talk about this? One of the things that I'm noticing, and I'm noticing this more and more now, is that these are the kind of things that we are not prepared for. I was prepared to do that surgery. I was prepared to do that thoracotomy and cut that chest open in less than a minute to save a life. We get well trained to do the jobs we signed up to do, but there is very little, like little to no preparation when it comes to preparing for these environments. And so one of the things I realized is that I struggled more with navigating these different things than with actually doing the job. They could tell me I could do the job all they wanted, but I could read, I could study, I could operate, I could do all the things that I needed to do the job. But what I struggled with was, how do I navigate these systems? Right? How do I navigate a system where my own colleagues who are supposed to be supportive are the very ones that can't believe that as a trauma surgeon, I could do one of the most basic procedures, or who are maybe influencing other opportunities that may be available, or colleagues who, as the trauma surgeon, as a leader in a trauma bay where I'm supposed to be leading that group, where people push back and say, no, I don't agree with you. How do we navigate these workplaces when our identities become problematic, where our identities cause us to have a more difficult time doing the job? How do we navigate that? And so, when looking back, I realized those are the things that I really struggled with. And so, I started approaching it from a career development, career advancement standpoint. And so, I've attended and spoken at many career development workshops and conferences. I've gone to so many that at one point I had to rethink and say, okay, what exactly am I gaining from this? Right. And a lot of the things that they talked about, I realized was, you know what? I could have used this earlier in my career. I could have used this way earlier in my training when I was the most vulnerable. Right. When I was the most vulnerable is when I needed this. When I'm in a position where I can say, you know what? Yes, I'm the one who did it. You have a problem with that. Or I could negotiate, or I can take my skills elsewhere. At that point, I feel like, you know what? I'm in a pretty good place. And anything else that I get is the icing on top, right? But what I realized over and over and over in all these different workshops and conferences is that when it comes to how do we change things for the people that are most vulnerable or that are a little bit lower on the ladder, how do we make things possible for these people? Nobody has an answer. Nobody has an answer. And everybody says, well, you have to work hard, improve yourself, and get to the position where you are able to make those decisions. So while that approach helps the people that have already made it, it does very little for the people that are still struggling in early career. And in looking back, to me, when I needed the most help was that very early career, limited power, vulnerable position. That is where strategy is really, really, really important. That's where I was most fearful. That's where I had the most to lose. And that's where I realized that, you know what, if I had proper guidance and if I had a better way to manage my expectations, to not be hurt by every attending who told me that I wasn't cut out to be a surgeon, by every feedback that just crushed my soul. If I had a strategy to deal with that, then I think my journey would have been so much better. So, this is one of the reasons why the Defiant Career Strategy is made for early and even pre career women to build a solid foundation and to change this mindset of just being helpless in navigating these systems and to change the narrative of what is possible. So it builds a foundation that changes our mindset, that completely changes the idea that you have to continue being helpless until you make it. That is how we're all trained, and that's how we're all programmed to think of our careers, that you remain helpless, be grateful for the opportunities that you're given, be grateful for having a seat at the table, be grateful for being invited, and just go along with it. And then when you're in a better position, now use your career strategy. Now plan to advance. And so I don't think it's ever too early to be strategic in planning your career. I don't think it's ever too early to start advocating for yourself and speaking up. It is never too early to start setting boundaries on things that you don't tolerate. And it's never too early to be yourself in any of these fields. Okay. So whether it's with a Defiant Career Strategy or with any other program that helps empower you to stand up for yourself, to advocate for yourself, to have a strategy of, you know what, you're not going to go through this blindly. You're not going to just shake your head and smile and be grateful to be where you're at and just tolerate that environment, regardless of what resources you use, as long as you have a strategy, as long as you know where you're headed. It's extremely, extremely important that we start implementing this early. Don't wait until you've gone through the trauma of hostile environments and feedback that's terrible, that just completely crushes your soul, and not having the tools and the strategies to deal with it. It is never too early for you to prepare. And whether it's a Defiant Career Strategy or any other coaching or personal development, whatever resources you use, right? It's extremely important for you to learn what the reality of your career is and plan for it. That's one of the things that I was very grateful for in hindsight, right? I remember this conversation I had with a fellow surgeon. She was a white woman who's a CT surgeon, and she has not experienced any kind of discrimination until she joined the boys' club of being a cardiothoracic surgeon. And it took her by surprise that she was being discriminated against and that she was experiencing misogyny and sexism. And so I asked her, I said, didn't you know that this is the world of surgery? And she said, no, all her life, she's been told that she could accomplish anything and everything, and that the sky was the limit, and that this was not part of her plan. And one thing I learned from that was that I was lucky to have the reality of the world that I was walking into clarified to me. From within my own community, I was told, well, you're a Muslim woman, you're Black, you're going to have a bunch of kids. This may not be the place for you. There's not that many people that look like you. And within the world of surgery, I was told, oh, yeah, you don't belong in this world. So the reality that things were going to be difficult for me, in hindsight, was one of the best things that prepared me, because things that I might have been blind to, things that I might have been, if I was told, hey, you could accomplish anything, everything that I experienced would have been even more surprising than they were. Right? I was still surprised by how horrible people could be. I was still surprised by how mean-spirited people could be. But the fact that I had a glimpse of what the reality was helped prepare me. And that's why it's extremely important that we manage our expectations. And this is a huge section in the Taking Up Space course where we dig deep into what do you do with that? How do you manage your expectations? It begins with acknowledging reality, right? When you set your expectations based on what's not reality, what's non-existence, equality, fairness, all the lack of retaliation, that if you speak up and you say, hey, you're violating my civil rights, that everything will be handled fairly, that's mythical. The reality is that it's not that simple. It's very difficult to navigate these places. And even when you do speak up and try to do the right thing, you, as the person who's being targeted, become more of a target with retaliation. That's the reality. But when you know reality, you can plan better. That's a really, really important part of strategy, is when you know what you're facing, you can plan better. And it is never too early. It is never too early. So whatever resources you use, and this is one of the things that I'm going to focus on in the second season of the podcast, is strategy. I want you guys to be strategic about your careers and your life goals, right? It's important to think about your goals in terms of both. We're often told compromise this for the other, right? Compromise your life goals for your career. And that's why our tagline for the Taking Up Space course is you do all of these things without compromising your life goals. It's extremely important that you have a strategy to do that. And regardless of what strategy you use, whether it's through the Defiant Career Strategy, Taking Up Space course, or any other resource, have a plan, and be strategic, okay? It is never, ever too early. Thank you for tuning into the podcast. I love to hear from you. If this discussion resonated with you and you found it helpful, drop a like and a review and come say hi on our Professional Muslim Women Podcast Facebook group or your favorite social media platform. I love hearing from our listeners. I'd really love to hear what you guys have to say about this issue. And don't forget to submit your burning career and life questions or any topics you'd like us to cover at the link below in the Mentoring Moments segment. Talk to you soon. Salam. Thank you for tuning in to the Professional Muslim Women Podcast, the place for Muslim women to inspire and be inspired. Please join us on our Facebook group, Professional Muslim Women Podcast, to continue the conversation and connect with Muslim women like you. Thank you to our sponsor, Defiance Academy, and the Taking Up Space course. Be sure to check out the course at the link below. If you have any burning career and life goals questions, or you'd like to suggest topics for us to cover, submit them to the Mentoring Moments segment at the link below. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and drop us a like and a review. We'd love to hear from you. As always, may Allah guide us all on this journey. Stay blessed. Wa alaikum salam.